For over 2,000 years, one name has echoed through history: Atlantis. We think of a magnificent island civilization, a cautionary tale about pride, and a mystery swallowed by the sea. For most of modern history, scholars have confidently dismissed the story as pure fiction, a clever allegory written by the Greek philosopher Plato. They tell us it's just a myth, a parable about the dangers of greed and power. But what if the greatest lie in history is that Atlantis was just a story? What if Plato, one of the sharpest minds who ever lived, wasn't just spinning a philosophical tale, but hiding a terrible truth in plain sight? What if the story wasn't a myth, but a map? Because when you strip away the allegory, the details Plato provides are chillingly specific. The precise dimensions, the advanced engineering, the exact geography. These aren't the flourishes of a fable. They are the cold, hard specs of a lost world, a blueprint for a catastrophe. This isn't just a treasure hunt. This is a cold case, an investigation into a ghost that haunts our history. And what we're about to uncover will challenge everything you think you know about the ancient world.
Before we start the search, we have to go back to the source. And here's the first and most important rule of the investigation. Everything we know about Atlantis comes from one man: Plato. That's it. While later ancient writers like Plutarch and Proclus discussed it, they were only commenting on Plato's story. They weren't offering independent proof. The entire legend is laid out in just two of his works, the Timaeus and the Critias. In the dialogues, a character named Critias tells the story, claiming it was passed down through his family from the great Athenian statesman Solon, who in turn heard it from Egyptian priests. This long chain of whispers already makes scholars skeptical, but it frames the tale as a piece of genuinely ancient, lost history. Now, Plato definitely used the story to make a philosophical point. Many scholars believe it was designed to complement his ideas in the Republic, contrasting a virtuous, idealized ancient Athens with the powerful, corrupt, and greedy Atlantean Empire. In the story, the noble Athenians defeat the imperialistic Atlanteans, making it a powerful fable about the triumph of spirit over might. But it's the details that make you pause. Critias describes Atlantis as a huge island kingdom located beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Its capital was an engineering marvel, a city built of concentric rings of land and water. Plato gets incredibly specific, describing 3 rings of water and 2 of land, created by the sea god Poseidon himself. He even mentions a massive canal, 50 stadia long. That's about 9 kilometers, or 5.7 miles, cut from the sea right to the central harbor, making the entire city a port. He gives us dimensions. He tells us there were mountains to the north and a huge rectangular plain to the south. He talks about a civilization with advanced metalworking, a massive military, and a complex government. But, as the story goes, their character rotted away. Driven by greed, Atlantis tried to conquer the Mediterranean and was beaten back by Athens. Afterward, divine punishment came swiftly. In what Plato calls a single dreadful day and night, terrible earthquakes and floods struck the island, and Atlantis vanished beneath the waves. These are the clues: a location, a unique city plan, specific geography, and a catastrophic end. For centuries, this was all dismissed as fiction. But as our understanding of geology and the ancient world has grown, some of these fictional details have started to line up with real places and events in some very startling ways. Before we get carried away with tantalizing theories, we have to face the elephant in the room, the overwhelming scholarly consensus. Most historians and classicists today are convinced the Atlantis story is a philosophical invention. From their perspective, trying to find a literal Atlantis is like trying to pinpoint the physical location of Winterfell or Mordor. The arguments against it are strong. First, as we covered, the silence is deafening. There are no other independent sources. If a superpower that dominated the Atlantic and waged war on Mediterranean peoples really existed, you'd expect some mention of it in Egyptian hieroglyphs, Hittite tablets, or other Greek histories. But there's nothing, only Plato. Second, the story fits Plato's philosophical goals like a glove. It's a perfect cautionary tale against imperial ambition and moral decay. Many scholars think Atlantis was really a stand-in for Athens itself, which had suffered a humiliating defeat in the Sicilian expedition after getting too big for its britches. Atlantis's fall was a powerful warning to Plato's fellow Greeks about the dangers of arrogance. Finally, the timeline is a major problem. Plato says the war happened 9,000 years before his time, placing the fall of Atlantis around 9600 BC. Archaeologically, that date is completely out of sync with what we know about civilization. The society Plato describes, with organized armies, metalworking, and complex buildings, sounds like a Bronze Age empire from around 1200 BC, not a society from the Stone Age. For most academics, these anachronisms seal the deal. Atlantis is a brilliant myth, but a myth all the same. But what if the truth isn't so black and white? What if Plato didn't just invent the story out of thin air, but built his allegory around the memory of a real, devastating catastrophe? The ancient world was full of them. Entire cities could be wiped off the map, leaving behind fragmented stories that twisted into legends. One of the most popular theories for the inspiration behind Atlantis is the volcanic eruption of Thera, the island we now call Santorini. Around 1600 BC, a colossal eruption, one of the biggest in recorded history, literally blew the island apart. This cataclysm crippled the Minoan civilization on the nearby island of Crete. The Minoans were Europe's first great civilization, a sophisticated Bronze Age culture with incredible art, paved roads, and a powerful navy that dominated the seas. The eruption would have unleashed apocalyptic tsunamis and buried coastal towns in ash. On Thera itself, the city of Akrotiri was entombed Pompeii-style, preserving a stunningly advanced society. It's easy to see how the memory of a mighty seafaring civilization destroyed in a single cataclysmic event could have been passed down for generations, eventually reaching Plato. Some have even put forward a speculative theory that a translation error could explain the strange date, that when Egyptian priests told the story, the symbol for 100 was mistaken for 1,000. If so, 9,000 years becomes 900, placing the disaster right in the time frame of the Minoan collapse. This idea isn't widely accepted, but it's an interesting thought. Another plausible inspiration is much closer to home for Plato. In 373 BC, just a few years before he wrote his dialogues, the Greek city of Helike was destroyed overnight by an earthquake and tsunami. The city sank completely beneath the waves. The event was a well-known tragedy in the Greek world and would have given Plato a perfect, real-world example of a city swallowed by the sea as divine punishment. These events show us that the key parts of the Atlantis story, a powerful island culture and its sudden, watery demise, weren't just fantasy.
They were real memories and fears in the ancient world. Plato, a master storyteller, could have simply woven these threads of historical trauma into his grand philosophical tale.
This is where things get interesting.
If we entertain the possibility that Plato's story is more than just a fable with historical echoes, that it's actually a set of directions, then we have to think like detectives. We have to treat the Critias and Timaeus like a case file, a list of specific, testable clues. Any candidate for the real Atlantis can't just be any old sunken city. It has to match Plato's description. So here's our checklist. First, the location. It has to be beyond the Pillars of Heracles, out in the Atlantic Ocean. Second, the city plan. It must have those very specific concentric rings of land and water connected to the sea by a canal. This isn't a vague description, it's a blueprint. Third, the geography. There should be mountains to the north and a large rectangular plain to the south. And finally, archaeology. A true candidate needs evidence of a major city. We'd need to find ruins of harbors, temples, metallurgy, and signs of a complex society on the scale Plato described. The absence of ruins is a powerful argument against any proposed site. With these criteria, we can move from wild speculation to real analysis and put one of the internet's favorite theories to the test.
In the middle of the Mauritanian desert lies a geological feature so strange it almost looks unnatural. It's called the Rishat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara. It's a series of nearly perfect concentric rings visible from space, and recently it has become the internet's #1 candidate for Atlantis. At first glance, the similarities are uncanny. Proponents point to a stunning list of matches. Plato described a city of rings. The Rishat structure is the most spectacular set of geologic rings on Earth. Plato said there were mountains to the north. The Adrar Plateau rises just north of the structure. He mentioned a great plain to the south. A vast, flat expanse stretches out to the south. Plato even noted that Atlantis was built with red, white, and black stone. Those are the main colors of the rock in the Rishat's rings. Some even claim the diameter of the inner rings closely matches Plato's dimensions. On the surface, it's an incredible set of coincidences. But this is where our checklist comes in handy. When we move from satellite photos to hard science, the theory falls apart. First, the geology is all wrong. Scientists agree that the Rishat structure is not the ruin of a city. It's a natural geologic dome, a feature formed by uplifted layers of rock that have eroded over millions of years. The rocks themselves date back to the Cretaceous period, but the key point is this: it's a work of nature, not man. Second, the scale is off. While some measurements seem to line up if you cherry-pick them, the structure's total diameter is over 40 kilometers, far larger than the city Plato described. Plus, the rings are not uniform channels that could have been used as harbors. They are uneven ridges and valleys with no trace of the sophisticated canal system Plato detailed. And third, and this is the nail in the coffin, there is no archaeology. The Rishat structure has been surveyed. And what did archaeologists find? They found Stone Age tools, mostly Acheulean hand axes.
These artifacts tell a story of early hunter-gatherers living in a once greener Sahara. But they are not the remains of a vast Bronze Age metropolis with temples and harbors. There is no lost city here. The Rishat structure is a geological marvel. But as a candidate for Atlantis, it's a mirage. The resemblance to Plato's description is a fantastic coincidence, a trick of geography that has fueled an exciting but ultimately unsupported theory.
So where does our investigation leave us?
We started with Plato's story, the only blueprint we have for a lost world. We saw how it works as a philosophical tale, a warning against pride that most experts rightly see as fiction. Yet we also found real historical traumas, the eruption of Thera, the sinking of Helike, that were likely the seeds from which the myth grew. We built a rigorous checklist from Plato's own words and used it to test the popular Eye of the Sahara theory, only to find it wanting. Does this mean the search is over? That Atlantis is just a story? Maybe. The physical evidence for a city matching every one of Plato's details simply hasn't shown up. But the legend's true power isn't about a physical place. It's about the questions it makes us ask, our fascination with lost golden ages, and the haunting idea that a whole chapter of the human story could be erased by disaster. The search for Atlantis is really a search for a deeper, more mysterious past. Plato may have wanted to write a cautionary tale, but he ended up creating a call to adventure that has inspired people for over 2,000 years. The city of Atlantis might be lost for good, but the quest to understand its meaning has only just begun.
What do you think? Is Atlantis a complete myth? Or is there a kernel of truth still waiting to be discovered? If you think it was real, where is it hiding? Let us know your theories in the comments. And if you enjoyed this investigation, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world.